A victory won not only for our own time, but for the long and better days that are to come.
Evoking the war and channeling the Churchillian spirit has always been a national pastime. It's become supercharged in the Brexit debate.
Hitler.
It's Hitler.
By Hitler.
To fight on against Hitler.
Hitler.
And Hitler.
Listen, don't mention the war. I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it all right.
Mentions of the war have long been embedded in British culture, but nowadays they're taking on a new fervour.
Britain is going to make the great escape. We're going to get out of this union.
Join in.
During the 2016 referendum, both Leave and Remain used wartime images to make their case.
Bombed and destroyed by Nazi warplanes 75 years ago.
Winston Churchill decided in May 1940 to fight on against Hitler. Now, he didn't want to be alone.
Winston Churchill stood up for parliamentary democracy, and that's what I believe in.
Now, for some Brexiters, the process of leaving the EU seems akin to fighting Nazis.
Napoleon and Hitler all wanted to create a single European power. And what Boris has said is that the EU is following in the footsteps of these historic figures, but using different means.
My father was at D-Day. He was never bullied by any German. And I'm his son. I'm not going to be bullied by any German either.
Social media is alive with memes comparing No Deal to the wartime experience. Some are even suggesting we can cope with food shortages in the event of a Brexit without a deal because we survived rationing.
Oh, it's so naive, isn't it? They have no idea. They have absolutely no idea. I feel like weeping because it's so utterly stupid. There I am again, my mother.
Meet Ruth Baden. Now 86, she was a wartime child and someone for whom rationing was a reality.
It's not just the bombing and the shortages, the women that were widowed and the children that were orphaned, the families that were just obliterated, the constant nightmare of wondering whether the people you love are still there.
How do you feel about politicians who evoke a war that they've never lived through?
I'm really quite angry at the stupidity and the nonsense that's being talked.
What are you angry at?
That rather sort of, that false pride. I mean, we're just a small island off the mainland of Europe. I mean, I think we have a great deal to offer, but let's not get above ourselves.
Ruth's wartime experiences lead her to believe we should remain in the EU. But others who saw the war feel very differently. Just 12 miles away, we've come to an airfield in Berkshire to meet a veteran pilot.
This thing's called a Tiger Moth and was the basic trainer. And it's the one you make the most mistakes on. And
94-year-old Brian Neely is a passionate Brexiter.
We don't want to be told by politicians who had nothing to do with the war, would probably be speaking German now, if it weren't for us. Why the hell should they come in and tell us what to do?
Brian was just a teenager when he signed up as a fighter pilot. He doesn't agree with politicians using wartime rhetoric, but does believe Britain needs more Blitz spirit.
I can remember Dunkirk and Churchill coming out with a major speech, and I can remember people actually coming out of their houses almost cheering the next day. And we had nothing, absolutely nothing. I'd say the same with Brexit. We've stood up alone before, and what makes us think that we can't stand up alone again?
Typifying the resolution displayed throughout the kingdom, the capital stands defiant.
Britain standing alone. It's a memory imprinted in our minds and seems to dominate the political narrative. But are we in danger of misremembering? Time to take a view from the other side. We've come to Berlin, a city filled with monuments of national shame, crying out to those who walk these streets. After the war, they even created a word for it, Vergangenheitsbewältigung, the process of coming to terms with the past. So is there something to be learnt from the way Germany remembers?
The mother and her dead son sits under the open sky. The civilian is not protected if the democratic structures of the state collapse, and all democratic structures are fragile.
Historian and former British Museum director Neil McGregor is now advising the Humboldt Forum in Germany. He believes Britain's view of its own history is dangerous.
The way the British deal with their own history is essentially one of self-affirmation. We use our past to tell ourselves that we've on the whole been the good guys, and when we come to difficult bits we just speed up. The greatest contrast is that the Germans live constantly with the failures of their own history. We're standing here in the middle of Berlin. Just behind us is where the Nazis burnt the books in 1933. And the Germans use that history to shape current politics.
Isn't it inevitable that British and German views on how we think about the past are going to be different because we have different histories? As far as Britain is concerned, we were on the right side.
Of course, that's true. What you do with that central fact is what's interesting. The Germans took the fact of being on the wrong side to think hard about what that means, what went wrong, and what can always go wrong in a democratic society. What is not said enough, I think, is that Britain alone in 1940 was Britain with the whole of a huge empire. From the German point of view, standing here above all in Berlin, in East Berlin, the Second World War was, of course, determined essentially by the Russians and by the Americans. There is something very concerning about Britain's reluctance to abandon 1940. The desire to go on living in the world of the evil Nazis and the good British. And I think that has definitely distorted the political debate.
So how is Britain's political debate, with plenty mentions of the war, received in Germany? Here's the view from one German who's a close observer of British politics.
These Brexit negotiations are very unpleasant at the moment, but at the end of the day, it's people going to Brussels, having tea and having very unpleasant discussions in peacetime. It is inappropriate and is distasteful in my opinion, and frankly it needs to stop.
There are many Brits who say, we are proud of our role in World War II. We stood up against Nazism. What's wrong with that?
You have every right to be proud. I don't want to take that away, and let me just say, as a German, I continue to be grateful for the part you've played in liberating us from the Nazis. When you compare the EU to Nazi Germany, you're not just offending Germans. Think about the countries who've greatly suffered under German occupation. I mean the Netherlands, for example, or France, or Poland. To tell these people who've been victims of Nazi Germany that they are like the Nazis is beyond offensive.
Sorry, I got a bit confused because everyone keeps mentioning the war. So
44 years on, and somehow this sketch feels ever relevant.
Will you stop talking about the war?
Me? You started it?
We did not start it.
Yes, you did. You invaded Poland.
Perhaps it's time the Basil Fawltys of today got a proper history lesson.